The Ravens' win against the Chargers in that horrible game unfortunately had a bit of a downside. Two players, Kolar and Arthur Maulet, ended up on injured reserve.
Placing both of them on IR has some implications, but I think the impact's a little bit different for each player.
In what way?
Well, Kolar as a starting tight end, obviously, that leaves a bigger hole to fill.
Okay.
Especially his run blocking, that was really a key part of the Ravens' diverse rushing attack. So his absence is going to force them to make some changes to how they approach things.
Yeah, his placement on IR means he's going to be out until January. And initially, Coach Harbaugh seemed a little unsure about making that move. It sounded like they were hoping for a quicker return.
I think initially they probably were hoping he'd recover quickly. Maybe they were thinking they could even use that bye week after the Eagles game to give him more time. But the fact that they did decide to put him on IR suggests that the injury is probably more serious than they thought at first.
So no chance of him coming back for that Steelers game.
It doesn't look like it.
And then Maulet also went on IR. But that seems like less of a concern. He only played in 3 games this season before the injury.
Yeah, agreed.
So let's focus on Kolar's absence for a bit. What's this going to mean for the Ravens' tight end depth chart?
Well, the Ravens have Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Zaire Mitchell-Payton, and Scotty Washington left at the tight end position. Andrews is obviously their main tight end, so he'll probably have to take on a bigger workload now. And Likely, who's shown promise, he could see a bigger role too.
Can Likely really fill the gap left by Kolar? It seems like his strengths are more on the receiving end than the blocking side.
I mean, Likely can block, but it hasn't been his main focus. The Ravens may have to get him more involved in that aspect of the game. They might have to change some of their plays or formations to fit his strengths.
So where do Mitchell-Payton and Washington fit into all of this? Are they ready to step up if needed?
Right now, they're mostly depth players. Mitchell-Payton has shown some potential, but Washington hasn't really been tested. Their roles will probably depend on how fast Likely can adapt and whether the Ravens decide they need to bring in any extra help.
What are some of the main things the Ravens need to think about when addressing this situation?
Well, the biggest thing is finding that balance. They've got to keep the run game strong, but also make the most of Andrews' receiving skills. And they have to figure out how to use Likely in a way that works.
So what are some of the options they have for filling the void left by Kolar?
Well, they could decide to lean on their running backs more, maybe use more 3 receiver sets, or they could even look at bringing in a new tight end from free agency. Each of those options comes with its own set of pros and cons, so they'll have to think it through carefully.
The Ravens are usually good at adapting, but this injury is a big challenge. How do you think this is all going to affect their overall game plan and their chances for a deep playoff run?
Well, the Ravens' success is built on their diverse offense. They can't afford to let either their running or passing game suffer. So the strategic changes they make are going to be really important, especially with the playoffs coming up. It really does highlight how important depth is in the NFL.
Do you think the Ravens will try to bring in another tight end to add some depth?
It's definitely a possibility, especially because the trade deadline's already passed, so their options are more limited.
But there are still some veteran tight ends out there in free agency.
Exactly.
Any ideas who might be a good fit for the Ravens system?
It all depends on what they need and what the players are good at. They'll have to consider things like how well they can block, how good they are at receiving, if they're familiar with the Ravens' style of play, and even if they'd fit in well with the team.
Finding that balance between addressing the immediate need and the long-term impact is a tough call. How could this injury affect the Ravens' salary cap and their ability to make other moves with the roster?
Bringing in a new player this late in the season will definitely have an impact on the salary cap. The Ravens will need to weigh the cost of bringing in a veteran against the potential benefits and risks.
The Ravens are known for being very careful about how they manage their roster. Do you think they'll be looking for a tight end with the specific skill set or someone who's more of an all-arounder?
I think their decision will probably depend on how they see Likely's development and their overall offensive strategy. If they feel like Likely can handle the blocking well enough, they might go for a tight end who's a really good receiver. But if they need more help with the blocking, they might go for a tight end known for his blocking skills.
Kolar's injury has really had a ripple effect. It's forcing the Ravens to rethink their personnel and their game plan.
It really shows how unpredictable football can be. Injuries are just a part of the game, and teams need to be able to adjust quickly.
The Ravens are coming up on a really important part of their season. How much do you think this injury will affect their chances of making the playoffs?
It definitely makes things more complicated. But the Ravens have a history of bouncing back. Whether they can get past this setback depend on a few things: how much likely improves the adjustments the coaches make, and how well the whole offense performs.
We've talked a lot about what Kolar's injury means right now, but what about the long term? How could this change how the Ravens think about the tight end position in the future?
This situation might make the Ravens rethink how much depth they have at tight end going into the next offseason. They might focus on drafting or acquiring a tight end who's good at both blocking and receiving someone who can contribute in multiple ways.
This could be a valuable learning experience for the Ravens. It could influence how they build their roster and make strategic decisions down the road.
I agree. It really emphasizes how important depth is, being able to adapt and always striving to improve in a league that's constantly changing.
With Kolar out for a while, what are your final thoughts on how the Ravens can handle this challenge and stay competitive?
The Ravens are at a turning point in their season. How they respond to this challenge will show how strong they are as an organization, how good their coaching is, and how resilient their players are. What happens in the next few weeks will tell us a lot about whether they can adapt and overcome this, and ultimately how far they can go in the playoffs.
It's been great talking through all this with you.
I've enjoyed it.
The Ravens do seem to have a knack for bouncing back. You think they can really overcome this and make a deep playoff run without Kolar?
Well, their history definitely suggests they are a resilient team. But this injury does create a weakness that other teams might try to take advantage of.
Okay.
How well they adjust their offense and use their remaining players will determine their success.
Their performance over the next few weeks will be really telling. How is this situation going to test their ability to adapt?
This next stretch of the season is going to be even more critical now. How well they maintain their level of play despite losing Kolar, that'll really show us what they're capable of in the playoffs.
So what are the key things that will determine whether or not they can really fill Kolar's shoes?
Well, Isaiah Likely's development is going to be huge.
Okay.
The coaches are going to have to come up with a game plan that plays to his strengths, but also minimizes the impact of his lack of experience with run blocking.
The Ravens coaching staff is known for being pretty creative. How might they adjust their schemes and play calling to deal with this new situation?
They might use more formations with two tight ends where Likely is primarily a receiver, and they use a combination of Andrews and Mitchell Payton for blocking.
Got it.
Or they could go with more three receiver sets to take advantage of their talented wide receiver.
The Ravens have always relied on their ability to run the ball effectively. How do you think Kolar's absence is going to affect their rushing attack?
They may need to tweak their blocking schemes, maybe rely more on pulling guards or getting help from the fullback to make up for Kolar not being there on the line. They could also try incorporating more misdirection plays or option runs to open up running lanes.
The Ravens always seem to find a way to win. What makes you confident they can handle this challenge?
A lot of things, really. They have a strong organizational culture and experienced coaching staff and players who are used to bouncing back from setbacks.
Right.
They've consistently shown a commitment to adapting and evolving, which is really crucial for any team to succeed in the NFL over the long haul.
It's been really interesting talking with you about all of this.
I've enjoyed it too.
Any last thoughts on what we can expect from the Ravens as they move forward without Charlie Kolar?
Well, this injury is a significant setback. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's impossible for them to overcome. They have the talent, the coaching, and the organizational support to adapt and stay competitive. How they do over the next few weeks will be a real test for them.
Great. Thanks for joining us. It's been a great discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Goodbye and see you in the next video.
Goodbye, and see you in the next video.